start the slideshow. So let me know if you don't see this. So we're going to talk about just very basic project management essentials today. And so the objectives are, we're just going to define project and project management so that we're all kind of on the same page. And also talk about some project management vocabulary and discuss it in terms of academic and or everyday projects. And then I have sort of a top 10 list that I've pulled together just from my experience managing research projects. And we'll go through some of those and hopefully take a few minutes to apply some of the techniques to your own research project. So why does this matter? Project management. I think you all have projects in your life, whether or not you consider them projects, quote unquote projects, you do. So you are a project manager. You all have a research project that you are managing, and you probably have many personal projects in your own life aside from this that you manage. You also may need to hire a project manager at some point in your career. So this, I think, is why it matters. And of note, in 2016, there was a public law that came out that basically said that federal agencies or any institution that receives federal funding must consider best practices of project management and program management to prevent things like unfinished business. According to one study, only 64% of government initiatives actually meet their goals. Project management can also be found to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, but also improve consistency across agencies. So on to the definitions. These are all taken from the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, which is considered the Bible, if you will, of project management. It's a very thick book. Probably don't need to read it or know anything about it unless you plan on getting your certification. But according to that book, a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. The project manager then is the person assigned by the performing organization to lead the team, responsible for achieving those objectives. And then finally, the PMBOK Guide is the Project Manager Book of Knowledge. It's in its 7th edition, and it's a collection of best practices, definitions, terminologies, and guidelines for PMs. So what is a project? So based on that definition that we just read, that it's a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. I'm putting up a picture of 2 activities. One is supposed to be a picture of a home renovation. It looks more like a demolition at this point. And the second picture on the right is of someone who appears to be in a factory of some sort, manufacturing a product. So wanted to ask you all, you can answer via chat or just go off mute and answer, which of these do you think is a project? And if you have an idea, if you could kind of answer why you think it would be a project. Let's see. I'm getting a lot of both, which is quite interesting because I get this a lot. So maybe I need a more distinct differentiation between. So what I was going for here, I do think that both is possibly an answer because if you're manufacturing a product, it would depend on where you are in the phase. If you've created the product and all you're doing is coming to the factory every day and you're manufacturing that product over and over again, that usually is considered like an operational task. So it's just a repeated activity. So other examples of operations are like accounts payable, customer service, procurement. Those are sort of things that they might be different each time you do them, but the activity itself is the same. versus a house renovation is really unique. It's really a temporary endeavor. There should be a start and an end time, and it should be creating a unique service, product, or good. So in this case, any room you create, the room in my house is unique from someone else's room in their house. So that's in the sense that it's unique. So just kind of chew on that. But I do think they both could be an answer, because if you are creating a new product at the very, very beginning, that would be, I think, a project that then you would have to, until you create that product that you're just then going to manufacture. Does that make sense? Okay. Charlene says you have a chapter on this. All right. So what about academic research then? What do you think those are projects or not? Or maybe both? The answer, Christina says yes, and that would be right, because most academic research projects do have a start, they have an execution of a project phase, and they have a finish. And at that finish line, they typically have outcomes, a result of somewhat to share back. So academic research is done through projects for sure. I want to just briefly point out these principles. So again, this is in the PMBOK guide. This is what they call a guide for what project managers should do. And there are 12 of these. I'm not going to read all of them. I'll make sure I send the slides to you all so you can review these more thoroughly if you would like. But these are more just sort of principles to keep in mind when you are managing a project. A couple that I'll call out are creating a collaborative project team environment. I'm sure many of you in your research are doing just that. And another one I will call out is embrace adaptability and resiliency, because research projects require a great deal of adaptation across the life cycle. So, and also the performance domains. Again, this is taken from the Project Management Book of Knowledge, and these really cover what you need to know. And there are 8 domains. A domain is really just a group of related activities. They're really critical for the effective delivery of project outcomes. I like to think of these as the balls that project managers must keep in the air at all time while they are managing a project. So they run concurrently throughout the project. Without going through each of these individually, I'll just call out a couple. One are the stakeholders. So being able to identify and engage and communicate with stakeholders on your project is really important. Another one I'll point out is planning. Planning should take the most time of your project. If you're doing your project well, you will spend the most time in your the planning phase. And uncertainty is really just managing the risk on your projects and being able to anticipate things that might go wrong and how you might mitigate those risks. And this is a nice picture of how the two are related. So really the principles of project management really guide the behavior to help you go through the different domains of the project. So this is the reason I do this is mostly just to give you a sense that there is vocabulary and there are sort of techniques behind sort of what I think is the buzzword of project management and what that really means. So I want to start talking now more about the tools and techniques and templates for project managers. And I've just sort of consolidated this into kind of a top 10 list, which we can go through. And I'm hoping we can take a few minutes in between some of these just to have an opportunity to share back and maybe just practice a few of these. So tip number one, engage stakeholders in your project team. So as you are starting out on your project, one of the most important things you can do early on is make sure you identify all the stakeholders on your project and then look at what their roles and responsibilities are. What do they bring to your project team? And then find a way to check in with them regularly. Maybe it's meetings that you have and they attend. Maybe you're also sending them emails. Maybe you have a website for communication. There might be various approaches for how you're engaging those stakeholders. And then also making sure that you are showing team members your appreciation, gratitude, and offer support and guidance for the work they're doing on the project. And the second tip I have here, master your people skills. So Gandhi said, I suppose leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. I think this is probably one of, obviously it's up at the top, but I think this is arguably the number one tip to have, is really being able to hone in your people skills and making sure you have, not only some of the things listed here, like listening, motivation, responsibility, and teamwork, but also things like negotiation skills, being able to problem solve, helping to build your team, and conflict resolution skills are also very valuable. The third tip I'm calling chunk out the work. So the PMBOK guide refers to this as a work breakdown structure. So on the left, you'll see kind of a generic overview of what that might look like. So there's level 1, which is the overall project, and then it's kind of divided into tasks, subtasks, and work packages. So the example I use, because I think it's helpful to have examples, in the last year, we just had a home renovation project. And so that was my project. And my tasks are, which rooms am I renovating? And then within each of those rooms, I'm going to have subtasks like plumbing, electrical, materials. And then finally, each room is going to have a work package that might look like installing a tub, installing a vanity, or tile floor. So that should give you maybe an example of what that might look like. So I'm hoping we can just take a few minutes. If you want to think about a piece of your project that you're currently working on, it could be, it sounded like several of you are doing either surveys or focus groups, and you might be in the midst of that. If you want to think of something that's coming a little further down the line that maybe you haven't started, that might be helpful, or you can just sketch out what you've already done on your project just to kind of see how you've chunked the work out already, maybe without even thinking of it in that way. But if you can just take a few minutes and just jot down, just some different tasks. Again, it doesn't have to be in order. You can just throw out there, I'm doing a survey, so I got to do a lit review on questions. Just whatever activities are, if you can just take a few minutes, then we'll have a couple of minutes to share if anybody would like to. Let me know if you have any questions. Maybe just one more minute. Okay. Would anybody like to share a few ideas, a few of their
Sure,
activities?
I'll share.
Great.
So I know I joined a little late. I'm doing qualitative interviews, and kind of like where I'm at in this part is I'm finalizing the interview guide with my parent partner. But I actually, part of my budget was to hire a qualitative analyst, and I'm still I was told that they would be an analyst to help me, but I'm still kind of waiting to hear back on that. I just got a request from the IRB to kind of give them a few more documents, and I've been having meetings regularly with my parent partner, but I'm realizing I have some questions for Charlene about how to submit for payment. So those are kind of like tasks at hand.
Great examples. Does anybody else have anything they would like to share?
I can. So I'm a little bit further along with my project. So we've done 105 unstructured interviews and 37 dyadic interviews, which is a family member or support person and a child being interviewed together. And so now we're in the process of taking the information from those interviews and adapting a tool so that it's more accessible. And then we're having these meetings that I mentioned as we go through the process of adapting to check in with everyone to see, like, is this what you meant? And have further discussions. So that's kind of where we are right now.
So it sounds like there's maybe some different iterations that you're going to, through these meetings, find out and finalize.
Yeah.
So those would all be tasks. Those would all be considered activities, each of those. Great. Okay, well, thank you all for sharing. I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is about organizing the work or the chunks. So the first phase is typically when you're just kind of brainstorming all the things you have to do, so somebody said, well, I need to hire a qualitative analyst, or I need to have meetings to finalize a tool to use with parents. Those are all work tasks that have to be developed in order for your project to have a final result or outcome. But you also have to organize the work. So this is a picture here of just a very generic Gantt chart that kind of shows you, it's just one way you can organize the work on a project. And this is often referred to as a schedule. So this may help you initially decide what tasks will go first, second, and third. And then you'll also be able to notice tasks that can happen in tandem or parallel to each other, meaning they can happen at the same time. But then some tasks are contingent upon other tasks. So for example, you can't start painting your bathroom until you've put the drywall up. So this is an important phase of the project. And it's often, in terms of how long some of these activities take, there's a number of ways you can do that. I find that in research, what people tend to do in terms of, well, how long is it going to take me to develop a survey? Or how long is it going to take me to do interviews with 35 people? Usually, not always, but usually history can help with that a little bit. Also, how difficult is it going to be to recruit? Recruitment can take a very long time in some instances. So asking people that have done this kind of work before, their advice on how long some of these activities take is probably not a bad way to start if you've never done this before. I'm sure people like Charlene and Rishi also provide a wealth of knowledge in those areas as well. So on to organizing the work in your own project. If you can take a minute or two to just think about how you might chronologically, and several of you are already down the road just a bit on your project. So thinking about the tasks that are maybe coming up in the next 5 to 6 months, how would you kind of organize that work? So if you can just take a few minutes, maybe think of it on a monthly basis between now and, the end of the spring, kind of what tentatively packages or work packages you want to work on, and then we'll share back. Again, no right or wrong answers here. This is just an opportunity to think through how this might be applied in your research project now. Would anybody like to share back? Not an extensive chronology, but perhaps just a few things that you might be working on.
Sure, I can share. So right now, I'm at a point, as I mentioned earlier, with my project where we have a lot of the materials. We're just waiting for the final IRB approval of those materials. But thinking ahead about what's going to come down the line, we have our interview guide set and all of those things, but trying to think ahead in terms of who we're going to be recruiting, making sure that we have all of those materials set and all the context that we need for who we're going to be sending the recruitment materials to. Sorry, there is my cat. Of course, jump right in the frame. And then thinking also ahead about the next steps in terms of creating the curriculum and how we can start those things even before we have all of the focus groups done. So making sure we have the focus groups organized, thinking about the survey process that we're going to send out to the residents and physician assistant students and getting that started, and how that timeline can overlap with the focus groups itself.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
I use the time just to sketch out the biggest change in my team is that we lost our research specialist. So I hired someone new who's going to be starting virtually the 16th and then in person on the 1st. So I just created a timeline for kind of integrating her in the team and the training that I want her to have and
Great.
when that will occur. So that's what I use the time to do.
Great. Yeah, that's a project, onboarding somebody. Definitely a project. Okay. The 5th tip, software is your friend. So technology can really help you managing a project. And it really just depends on how complex your project is, whether or not you want to use something as savvy as Microsoft Project or Asana or Smartsheet. It may be perfectly fine for you to use Excel or possibly even a notepad and pencil. I know for me, when I manage 4 different research projects, I have a kind of old school here. I do have a notepad and pencil that kind of is my higher level. Here are my things I have to do this week on these different projects. But then I oftentimes use Microsoft Planner for if I have a team of people and there's a whole lot of details that have to be laid out. So I think it really just depends on how complex your project is, and also what software are you going to use. If you are not going to use it, there's no point. I think the biggest barrier for some of these project management software companies is that oftentimes people don't have time to figure them out. So I would just advise to use something that you know, unless you have time to learn something new, and then go for it. So what, and maybe we don't need a separate minute on this, but if any of you maybe can call out what technology or software programs you're using to help you organize or scheduling your research project. Would anyone like to share, or you can just think through which ones you might want to use if not?
I use a software called Trello, which is sort of like a project board software that I have written out both with the projects that I have, and then for each one, there's like a separate board of to do what I'm actively doing and things that I've done. And so I have it organized by different projects so that the things that I'm actively working on, like it allows me to kind of plan ahead, think of what things I'm going to be doing down the road, even if I'm not doing them now. And then I can kind of move them from each. It's very satisfying for me because I'm very much a like to-do list person who likes to check things off of my to-do list. And so I find that that's super helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a great one. I like the dashboard, and Microsoft Planner has a very similar setup to Trello. In fact, I think they may have borrowed some of the way they set up from them. Does anyone have anything else that they're using? Technology could be Excel, it could be, doesn't have to be a software program.
The biggest thing I use is RedCap.
And how do you use that to organize your project?
That's where I have my whole team. We keep subject logs.
Okay.
And deciding, you know, that's where we communicate about when we're gonna approach families. And that's how we keep track of it all. And also when we schedule interviews, it can auto-populate a list that we can sort by date. So that when I'm like, if I'm the one who's doing the interviews, then I can just go to that list and see this is, and we divide it up by week. So every week we can look at who did we screen, who did we approach, and then, you know, what are we scheduled to do? So are we going to interview them? Are they going to, you know, do a survey, or, you know, what part of the research are they involved in? And I think I'm still learning how to optimize with our remote research coordinators. It's been a lot more challenging. So I've really relied on RedCap to have communication across the team, because I think previously I had relied on being in person. But I'm open to other ideas for how to best do that.
That's great. I didn't realize, I don't use RedCap as much. I was just curious how that, I think of it more as like a survey database. So that's great that you can also use that. I'm showing you, hopefully you guys can see this. Can you see an Excel spreadsheet? Hopefully. This is just a template that we people in our group, we had a training a few years ago, and a project management training. And so this company sort of offered us this Excel spreadsheet set up sort of like this. And I have a template if anybody's interested. But here's just an example of how I use this to do a survey, a national survey of parents. And the subject was influenza vaccine hesitancy. And so this is just kind of how our team used this. I like it because it sort of gave me a roadmap of, you know, these different activities are going to take roughly this amount of time. And, you know, identified different teams who worked on different pieces of this. We had a third-party vendor that we had to communicate with. So there was a whole series of tasks we had to work with them on. So this is just an example. Again, happy to send you guys a template of this, and even this example if you're interested. It's just Excel. It's nothing fancy. I would say like the way I like to use this is really just a roadmap, because things are going to change. Things are going to, in particular, the iterations of survey development you think you only need 3 iterations, but really you need like 5 or 6 possibly, depending on the content of your survey. So, you know, this is, again, like I say, it's a roadmap, but you can see that all of these activities took about 7 months. And there were some changes to it, but for the most part, we held to this timeline. So I just wanted to show that example. Okay, number 6, anticipate the unexpected. So with this, I'm really talking about risk management. So just thinking about, so every project, regardless of how complex or simple it is going to have uncertainty. There are going to be things that happen that you didn't anticipate, and you need to have a backup plan. So the management process is really identifying what possible risks, what might go wrong. What might go wrong is you may not be able to recruit 35 people like you said you were. What is the probability of that happening, and what's the impact of that happening? Would that be okay if you only got 29 instead of 35, or would that be like a really bad thing? And then what is your mitigation or fallback plan? So if you recruit less than you said you were, is either that's okay, or maybe you need to recruit another network so that you can get your 35 interviews. So really just thinking through what those risks are, how they might affect your project, and a mitigation strategy. And you're just kind of doing this ongoing throughout the project. Number 7, make iterative and incremental changes as needed. So adaptive approaches to project management like Agile, and some of you may have heard that. It basically means that you're making iterative and incremental changes along the way. So instead of there being that Excel spreadsheet and that Gantt chart that shows you're going to do this activity and then this activity, it really means that you don't have everything done by May 17th. You're going to iteratively and incrementally make those changes as needed. I think research projects often require an agile approach because there is a lot of uncertainty and there is a lot of change that occurs. So this is just something to keep in mind on your project. Tip number 8, plan and run efficient meetings. I'm sure many of you have attended unproductive meetings. It's one of my pet peeves. Project meetings really should be productive. This is usually the main way you're communicating progress about your projects. So make sure you have an agenda. Start and end the meeting and honor those times. Invite relevant people. Are there people at your meeting that don't need to be there? And then maybe you consider bringing in special experts for a few of the meetings, depending on the agenda. And then make sure you're taking meeting notes, but also assigning action items and sending this back out with your team. And then anything kind of tangential that might come up, you put in a parking lot and make sure you come back to it at a later meeting. So these are just some suggestions. Tip number 9, be adaptable. So Darwin said it's not the strongest, but the most adaptable that survive. And I think in particular with research projects, that is the case. So being able to land on your feet, no matter what might happen, is very important. And finally, have a good attitude. Churchill said, attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. And I think that's very true. There was a research study done a few years ago where they looked at characteristics of the top 2% of project managers, and having a positive attitude was one of the most common traits among the top performers. So if usually the person managing the project has a good attitude about it, the rest of the team does too, and it really helps get your project goals met. I want to have an opportunity for questions. For thoughts. I also have some resources and templates I'm happy to share with you all, or I can send them to Charlene. So any questions you might have or thoughts or comments, please. No, we're ending a few minutes early otherwise.
Yeah, I just had a couple thoughts. Thanks so much for this, Allison. And it was great to hear about some of the work that the researchers are doing. In terms of like the technology, I definitely lean towards Asana or Trello. But one thing that I found is if there's, other folks that are going to be using the technology, definitely leaning towards what they're comfortable with too, because I've had to, adapt in terms of using Excel or what the group is most comfortable with. So just wanted to make that point. And then in terms of, breaking down just like as granular as possible in terms of tasks and roles, but also making sure everyone's on the same page, especially if things change. And also just wanted to emphasize that for lived experience partners and folks who, should be in the loop, especially as things change throughout the project.
Yeah, those are great comments. And I will echo your comment about using what's going to work for the team. And oftentimes what happens is the project manager might use a more granular program like Asana or Trello, but if you can't necessarily expect your team members to go in there and update their to-dos. You may have to do that for them depending on their level of, if they're comfortable with that. So yeah, that's great.
Alison, one thing I was thinking about when you did your presentation is it would be really nice if we had project management software integrated into electronic health records, and that with all of the, especially for those of us who do complex care, a lot of it, if you break it down, is essentially project management in a sense. And, there's so much to coordinate and so many things to do, but electronic records are more set up for, episodic, kind of care encounters. And so this is not on the topic of research or, anything, but just a comment that I think that these tools really have application in a lot of different areas. And, I hope that the emerging investigators will sort of think about, ways that they can sort of incorporate these skills in their research work and beyond, because I think they're really important.
Yeah, that's interesting to think of it on like almost the patient level. Each patient is going to be their own project in that sense, like especially the complex cases. So,
and we sometimes see that the families who, are often the most able to keep on top of things are the ones who sort of, for whatever reason, have project management skills. I mean, there are families who come in with Excel spreadsheets and, they keep everything on task. And, there are some who struggle with everything. And, it's almost like these skills could have value in that realm as well. So really interesting to think about.
I was going to ask a related question in terms of, when you're creating a team, what skills do you look for to integrate, or what skills do you try to foster on the team so that, that project management goes smoothly?
I mean, I think, the project manager and oftentimes research projects really have an important role because they usually don't have any authority to make actual decisions. You all are an exception because you might be the PI and the project manager at this point, from what little bit I know about what you all are doing. But from my perspective, like I don't have any authority over the people on my team. I'm not anyone's boss. So I have to really use my negotiation techniques, the power of persuasion, being able to listen. These like real soft skills, if you will, are critically important in particular if you have no authority, because you got to convince them to give you what they are supposed to give you, even though you don't really have the authority to do so. So really honing in on those, like I have a degree in social work that comes in handy quite a bit in this project, for project management. So
thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
All right, great. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Allison? Well, this is really such a fantastic session, Allison. Thank you so much. I think that it's just really very helpful to think about these things when you are starting out a project like our emerging investigators are doing. And as I mentioned, I think this has application to lots of different areas. So, usually our speakers are very, receptive. If you have a question, that comes up later, Charlene can, get you in touch with Allison. So if any of you have any questions that come up later, feel free to, pass them along. But yeah, this was really very, very, very helpful. So before we just end, Christy, I see you joined us. Are you able to say hello for a second and just give us a little update as to how your project is going?
Yep,
I know you're in
sorry.
clinic.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Christy. I kind of mentioned when Allison was asking like tasks that we're working on. So yeah, I have the project working on qualitative interviews with caregivers about the critical components of a medical home. And so kind of where I've been right now is we're finalizing the interview guide. Kate, my parent partner, and I have kind of like tried to focus it, make sure it's like a very succinct interview guide because we had a million questions to begin with, and like really try to whittle down onto what are some key things to ask. I just got a message from the IRB that they need one more document, and I think the biggest thing right now is that part of my project is funding a qualitative analyst time, and but I also get some kind time in kind through this research fellowship I'm doing. So I'm trying to get an analyst through my research fellowship so I can have some time through that too in kind. And right now they're just kind of backed up on projects. And so even though I kind of mentioned this to them when I was applying this spring, I still don't have an analyst assigned. So that's what I think our biggest thing is. And I want to move forward, but the idea is like having an analyst kind of review the interview guide would be really helpful so that they're comfortable with the questions too, and from their expertise that they feel like these are good questions. I've done qualitative interviews before, but I don't, I'm not an expert. So I'm trying to work through that. That's kind of like the biggest thing right now.
Yeah, that can be tough. Those folks are in high demand.
I know. So yeah, so it's just kind of, that's where I'm at. So, but other than that, I feel pretty good. I was hoping to maybe be a little bit further with my timeline and what I initially planned, but I guess I'm gonna adjust it. So, and maybe while I'm waiting for the analyst, I can work on finding one of these these products that people are using to organize time. I guess I haven't really heard of many of these things. So, yeah. Well, thank you.
Great. Oh yeah, it's always wonderful when our ERs help each other out, our team members. So, that's one of the great things. So thank you so much for volunteering. Yeah, this is fantastic. And the other thing I want to mention before we finish up is that we have this year we've developed a companion program to the Emerging Investigators program called the Pathways program, which is geared towards those who are very new to research, for them to have some experiences where they maybe get involved in projects. So we had our first meeting this week. It was fantastic. We had a huge turnout. We had over 40 people who've signed up for this program. And these are folks that have a wide range of experience. Some of them are students in medicine and nursing and social work, and others are those who have lived experience and or have worked in government agency type role. So most of them are interested in participating in projects to some extent. And some of the roles they potentially can have are doing literature reviews or coding and theming. We're talking about that, helping write or create tables and figures and everything, and those sort of tasks. So I just wanted to offer that if any of you in your projects might have might have, space for a student to help you with some of those things, and they can participate in this program, I should say. Please let me know, because it can be a win-win type of situation where they learn a little bit about research, and you get some extra hands in your work. So if you have that or know of anything that in your ecosystems that might be where there might be some opportunities, please let me know. So
Yeah. I think one of the your new team members is from Colorado, that I've worked with, Amy. So I'm really excited.
yes, we actually, because the network's based here, we have had quite a crop of people from Colorado. So I'm going to be talking to Charlene and others about maybe the Colorado folks can take some lead in finding some local projects for.
Yeah, I always have projects. I think Amy knows that, but I don't know about the other people
you
that I've worked
all
with.
you all have a bunch of great, yeah, there's so many great people at Colorado who are doing some great work. So we definitely want to get folks involved in what you're doing. So yeah. So okay, great. Well, we're just about the end of the hour. So so thanks everybody. Thanks again, Allison, for a wonderful talk and session. And enjoy the rest of your days, everybody.
Hi, Rishi.
Hey, I don't know, maybe did you step away, DT, from your thing? You may want to, if she stepped away, maybe you might want to remove her from this
I
session.
just, I mean, nothing confidential or anything. I wasn't able to get to the pathways meeting that you had because I had a conflict.
Yeah, no problem.
But we're meeting with MCHB in an hour or so for our monthly, checkup. And so I just wanted to ask you if there was anything to report to them besides, that we had like a ton of amazing people.
Yeah, no, actually, Sarah Beth and their new person, I can't remember if her name is Adele or
Oh,
something. They actually,
Akila.
Akila, yeah, they were there.
Oh, they were
They,
there. Okay, fine.
yeah. So they listened in. They were busy doing family stuff, so they weren't like participating, but they had it sort of like, they just put themselves on mute and were kind of listening, and while they were, Sarah Beth was taking care of her kids and stuff. So, so
Okay,
and great.
cool. So it went well and
Yeah, no, everything went well.
wow. Um,
We're still recording, by the way.
oh, oops. Hang on.